door neighbor was Junior Johnson. So there's a lot of history. These guys are amazing, but Popcorn Sutton's probably the most famous one of all time. So let's talk about his recipe. Popcorn did 2 or 3 things quite unusual, and one of them is malted corn malt. Anybody that worked with him or has learned from him or he's connected to, which is quite a few people now, may employ malted corn. But corn malting is quite difficult and quite rare. I've seen it, I've used it rarely, but it's fun. But he wanted to do all corn flavor. He had a lot of white sugar, and the corn was yellow corn, and he did like almost a cream corn thing. It was cooked down like a cream corn. So it was sweet, and it was syrupy, it was beautiful, and it made an amazing, obviously, he's one of the most famous moonshiners ever, so made an amazing product. I think his main apprentices, those guys are awesome too, and God bless those guys. I think they use white corn primarily. I have not had a lot of fun with white corn. I've used it a bunch, but I don't have, it's, for me, here in Colorado, it creates a whole lot more gummy quality. It's thicker, and it causes me all kinds of trouble. So I'm not a big white corn fan, just purely because of the way it works. Although the earthy flavors and grassiness that it gives are pretty cool. But of course, they're using white corn from back there, which is a whole different deal. I'm using this organic Colorado corn from the Native American tribes in Colorado. Anyway, that's another whole story. But that's a corn-based thing. Tim, and he's famous now, and his family, we knew of them, his dad and such. Those guys are awesome. His recipe has barley and rye and corn in it, so it's almost like a bourbon recipe. The guys in Kentucky, southern Kentucky, tend to use even more rye. And of course, in central and northern Kentucky, the moonshine is almost always sort of a bourbon recipe. A bourbon recipe is majority corn with malted barley to provide the enzymes, and rye for flavor. Now, you can also do this with wheat, and of course, several people have started experimenting with wheat. Now, since we're talking about the Smoky Mountains, the Appalachian Mountains, and that region, North Carolina, Tennessee, Kentucky, Virginia, those areas where all these people are from, my family and all the guys we're talking about, there's not a whole lot of use of wheat. Wheat is more of a big plains thing, out in the plains. And so you'll see it up in Canada, and you'll see it used as an ingredient in some beers and moonshines, but it's kind of rare. Our bourbon is wheated. It's a wheated bourbon, you might get from a Maker's Mark or from a Weller, Stitzel Weller, Pappy Van Winkle. That's what our bourbon's like. But that's something that I've been playing with. I wrote a book on bourbon and all that. Now, I'm a bourbon fan, but kind of a bourbon guy. But that's not my family history. That's not the moonshine. My grandfather's recipe is a classical moonshine in that it's a corn whiskey. But he did use, and he went down to the grain guys, which I think were connected to some of the breweries, because he used malted barley. And his recipe, as I've mentioned before, was basically 90% yellow corn from our fields that we grew, that was dried and ground, and then mixed with 10%, give or take 10% of malted barley. And that was the fuel to make the process work. A lot of shine is straight sugar. A lot of people that make inexpensive shines will just dump mostly white sugar. So I've had shine that's called sugar shine that's 100% white sugar. Now that is not very flavorful. It can be smooth and it can be delicious. I mean, you can drink it obviously, but it's not really what you would call flavorful. There's not a lot of grains to it. Some people do a lot of sugar and then add something for flavor to it, a little bit of corn, a little bit of rye or whatever. But most of these guys have a complex recipe that they've developed or their family has developed over years, sometimes hundreds of years. So you'll see some guys using rye, So that's why my grandfather's grandfather, who was much closer to his German immigrant relatives and was much more in love with rye and the flavor of rye, made a half rye moonshine. So you can see why a quarter malted rye, a quarter raw rye, and half corn, and 10-20% white sugar, that this will be a very unusual recipe. And that's the 1889 recipe that we've been working on. So it's quite unusual, and it's a whole lot of fun. And like I said, it's 13 days of fermentation, so who knows what we're looking at. I have no idea. It could be the best, most amazing thing we've ever had in our lives. But all those guys, whether they're the relatives or the families of all those shiners, and I haven't mentioned dozens more of them, but just God bless all those guys, and I hope they get a lot of success and a lot of happiness and a lot of great blessings. They work hard. They deserve it, and really, it shouldn't be illegal in the first place, but whatever. But I just hope those guys get blessed. All right, this is Victor Matthews. It's a 2-part video on the world of recipes, and we're doing it during our blizzard break. Black Bear Distillery. See you soon.